Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Teatime with Teawrex. We are here with Rowan, my good, somewhat new friend, but I'm happy that we met, and we're going to be talking about merchandising today. The advertisements should be over, so we should be clear to launch now. But welcome, hi everyone, and this is Rowan. I pointed the correct direction. You are also welcome to talk and introduce yourself now.
Yes, hello, hi, my name is Rowan. I own Dual Wield Studio, which is a merchandise brand out of, I say Seattle, Washington. I moved to Portland, so it is technically still based in Seattle. It's where all our fulfillment happens, but I have a team that is basically all around the country, and then a person in Canada as well. So we do merchandise for Among Us. We do merchandise for Tamara Pierce. I've done merchandise for a bunch of different game studios in the past. Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to have you here.
Stoked to be here. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Also, I just realized I think I accidentally have part of my Discord thing pulled up because I was messing with your audio. My bad. I was gonna mark apparently our video conversation as read. Don't worry about it. Oh, all right. So, on this episode, as Rowan said, and it kind of introduced and I introduced as well, it's about merchandising. So if you have any burning questions while we're talking, feel free to throw them in the chat. About any kind of merchandising. If you're an indie game dev, maybe an indie streamer who just wants to know more about, I say indie streamer like it's like a specific subgenre of streamer. Like gamer, yeah, but I was thinking like technically I guess every streamer is probably independent, more than likely, so it's kind of like redundant. Anyways, I'm digging myself into a hole. If you have any questions, feel free to toss them in the chat. Towards the end, we are going to be pulling questions from you during the chat to, hopefully answer. So, you already heard from Rowan a little bit about herself, but I kind of want to dig a little bit deeper. That way we kind of have a nice jovial time. So what games are you playing right now, Rowan?
It's just Destiny. It's just Destiny. I haven't played another game. I mean, well, in Among Us. I have to play that for work stuff and play it sometimes for fun. But yeah, it's all Destiny all the time. In the past, I was very, very addicted to Dragon Age Inquisition. Mass Effect, I've blown through Legendary Edition. I did my first playthrough, and then got probably 70% of the way through my second playthrough, and it's stalled out because Destiny.
Wait, was it your very first time playing Mass Effect? Was Legendary Edition? That's actually awesome. You probably got like the best experience there is for Mass Effect then. That's awesome.
Yeah, I played it way back. I played Mass Effect 1 and I got stuck at it was like right at the start. I got stuck in a very embarrassing position and like rage quit and was like, I'm not doing this. So when it came out, it was like, oh, the controls make sense. I can play this game, and proceeded to spend several hundred hours doing it.
Yeah, nowadays we get a little bit spoiled by like accessibility and like really good control key bindings and all that kind of stuff too. So I get it. Mass Effect 1, although I love the series, just there's some bits and pieces that don't age as well as others, right? So it's just a little hard to get through. But I do agree that like the Legendary Edition, to feel like with the up-resing and a lot of other changes too, was a lot more palatable to get through. So I just kind of want to go right into it. So give me like the most top level explanation of what you do for someone like me who quite literally knows nothing about like merchandising aside from like the very small business type owner thing where it's like, I make a shirt with like a teacup and a dinosaur on it and I give it to people. Like what is it? What is the day-to-day for you?
So my job, I think the best way to explain it, or at least how I attack it, because I feel like everybody does merchandising differently, is I try to find a way to make the impossible possible. So what often ends up happening is that somebody will come to me and say, I want to make this thing. And my job, before anything else, is to figure out how to do it. Because more often than not, when somebody comes to me with something, it's usually not possible to do the exact thing that they want to do, either because of a manufacturing situation. So like, for example, they can't order enough quantity to make it worthwhile for the manufacturer to get the machine out to die cut, 100,000 units. Like it's just not a thing that an indie game dev is going to be able to do. And so then the discussion becomes, okay, you want a statue that lights up, talks, and brings a sword down like this. What are you going to be okay with based on your budget? And so it's figuring out like what can be cut, what can be shifted, what can we do to make that as close to what you were looking for as humanly possible while staying within the realm of budget and price point for your customers. The pandemic hasn't helped matters with what people can afford.
Yeah.
So how do you make it something that's accessible? How do you still make an accessible item that is cool and is ethically made and is sustainably made? And more often than not, like you have to cut something. So like a typical day for me is right now it's paperwork. That's all I do. That's what it feels like. It's just talk to the insurance agent. Okay, get the insurance set up. Talk to the bank. Get the bank stuff set up. But like generally speaking, we have like a stand up. And so that's where everybody kind of goes through, what are you working on today? What are the blockers? What are the things that you were doing that could be made easier now that we have everybody, quote unquote, in the same room? From there, it's, without getting into like the boring stuff, it's like I go into my inbox and I read emails.
And I respond expediently and energetically.
So it depends on what I'm doing that day. There's a bunch of different ways that manufacturing kind of works. So there's, let's call it business to business, right? So that's my clients who are indie game devs who I might have to give a status update to. And so it's contacting them and saying, hey, manufacturer got back to us. The plush gun that you wanted to make actually is not going to work. So what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and layer felt together to get a gun that looks like a gun, as much as a plush can look like a gun. And then we're also going to do, a sewn one that has a printed design on it. So you just print out the little block and then it's got the design, the gun that you want on it printed. And it's like a little mini pillow. So it's a lot of like, it's so much emails. It's so much emails. I can't do art though. So I signed myself up for this.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's a lot of, talking with the manufacturer, figuring out what the manufacturer's problems are. Is the fabric in stock? Did the boat with the fabric just get caught in the port and it just lives there now and you can't make anything right now? Cool. So do I need to get fabric from another vendor? Do I, what do I need to do? Lately, it's just a lot of problem solving.
Maybe get some fabric that doesn't come from the Suez Canal. I understand. Yeah. Get stuck for unknown periods of time.
Yep. So it's just a lot of problem solving. And I think that's what I enjoy the most about it is even if I don't do a lot of the creation stuff, it's still, figuring out how to make someone make the thing that they, in a lot of cases, especially for indie game devs or indie streamers, or God, now I said indie streamers too.
Just blame me. That's my fault. Everyone chat and everyone who's listening can just yell at me about that statement.
It's figuring out how to make a physical representation of this thing that they've probably wanted to make for a long time, because merchandising really didn't pick up, I would say, and it's always been around, but like you didn't really see it as prevalent until the last couple years. And so if they've been sitting on that for a while, it's figuring out, how do I make the coolest possible thing within their budget?
Yeah, I know growing up, like the most merchandising you would get is only for like typically these like humongous, type brands like Pokemon, for example. Like when I was growing up, there was tons of Pokemon merchandise. But for the most part, for like games in general, if you wanted to have merchandising, you basically had like a Prima guide. And then like that was pretty much it. Maybe you might have like an art book occasionally, like years after the game comes out. Or like weird situations like Earthbound, where when Earthbound came out, it had like a giant box with the Prima guide. It had scratch and sniff stickers. I forgot about that. That just like rattled in my brain. And stuff like that. But it's definitely a newer part of, I think, the gaming industry, because I think now, like, as gaming becomes more of a hobby, especially, and way more globally recognized with mobile gaming and console gaming and, the litany of, even just like card games too. Like just the gaming industry is just booming, right? So I feel like it only makes sense that, of course, people want to have maybe some more items that might, reflect, something that they really love and enjoy and they keep nearby them at all times. If you're listening on audio, I just flexed that I have a super awesome N7 helmet. Don't worry.
I was a fool and I didn't get that, and I am so mad.
Thank you to BioWare for sending that to me, because I also totally missed the pre-order for it and I felt awful when I woke up and they were sold out. So thank you to them. Okay, so one thing, so now that we have a general idea of like kind of like what you go through, which first off, by the way, kind of sounds a lot like, aside from being the actual like, co-founder and like owner in person, like really driving your business, it sounds like a lot of your day-to-day work kind of is like problem solving and almost producer work, where it's keeping track of everything for a specific project and then ensuring it gets like check-ins and lots of different like finish lines are being hit at the correct times. So walk me through this situation. So let's say, since you said, you and I both play Destiny, and I apologize if people out there don't play. It's a game that a lot of my friends and myself play, so I do apologize. So let's say I want to make a replica version of, let's say, one of the swords, and I come to you and say, hey, Rowan, I really want to have this cool sword, like, and that's all I give you. Is that enough? Like, where do we start?
I mean, that's enough. And my first question to you is, what's your budget? So looking at just the sword, let's take Falling Guillotine, right?
Okay.
So Falling Guillotine, let's say it's roughly 6 feet. Do you want it 6 feet? Do you want a life-size replica of Falling Guillotine?
Do you want a giant rectangle that also can cut bread? Yes, absolutely.
Yes,
I want to say full size. I want to say 1 to 1. Let's
say you have no budget. Let's say you are made of money and all you want to do is spend that money. My job is to help you spend it. So,
okay.
Actually, what I would do is I would say that there are many different prop companies who are wonderful, and then I would direct you over to one of them because they would execute it much better than me. But if I were, oh, go ahead.
Now that I think about that, actually, like, so do you ever get? Sorry, this is a tangent, but do you ever get questions about like making stuff for people who aren't part of the IP? So let's say people who are a fan of X, Y, or Z game coming to you and saying, I want to either produce or make this thing. Do you have to go and like check with the company? Like what does IP laws even look like for you?
So normally, I would say 99% of the time, I just say I can't do it because a lot of the time, if they're coming to me for something, it's usually a friend and it's usually an IP I already kind of want to do something with. And so I don't want to like sully the waters and paint a target on my back by producing unlicensed stuff. That being said, I got these out just for this.
Oh,
I had a friend. We will get back to how to make Falling Guillotine though. So I had a friend reach out to me and was like, hey, I really like the Dark Knight pendants in, or a Dark Knight sigil thing. I've only played Final Fantasy 14 a little bit.
Sure.
But there are the little jobstone sign things. And they were like, I want a pendant that is my jobstone. In this case, I knew that I could make an individual unit of it. I love this friend to death, and I was like, I would do anything for you. Like, I'm not gonna accept any money for it. Thus, I'm just gonna figure out how to make it, and then I will give you one. And I mean, like Mr. John,
no transaction happening, therefore you're not breaking any IP laws. It's just being a fan, right?
This is not legal advice. I'm not giving anybody legal advice.
That's
right
a great.
now.
Okay, oh, you're smarter than I am. I'm learning too.
But yeah, like Mr. John Final Fantasy is not going to knock down my door and be like, you made a pendant and we're going to sue you. At least I hope not. I've done work with Square Enix before, so I don't think they would.
Yeah, Yoshi P would come to your house and be like, no, nightmare.
Yeah,
I'm here.
Yoshi P fist fight me in the 7-Eleven parking lot. Let's go.
He'll win.
Yes.
I would not cross that man. He has the power of 10,000 sleepless nights behind him.
So in this case, I looked at that and I was like, okay, so there's couple different ways that I would attack this. You could 3D print it. That's going to be just the easiest, lowest common denominator. 3D printing has actually progressed a significant amount from where it used to be. You can do full color 3D printing. It's absolutely fascinating. The Mamaki is probably the best example of that, but there's like 2 different 3D printers that I am aware of. There are 2 different 3D printers that can do full color 3D printing with like a gorgeous range of colors.
Out of curiosity, what would the cost of that be?
$150,000. Not that I've looked that up because I thought that I could buy one.
Good news, money's not an object in this fake scenario, so we're cold.
Yep.
Just a low price of $150,000 for a prop that I just am gonna use for myself. That seems reasonable.
That's not even right. But that's not even counting. You have to have someone who knows how to use it. So you have to go get them trained. You have to have the space. You have to have the electricity bill. You have to have the finishing stuff. So when it comes out, you have to sand it down. You have to do all sorts of finishing stuff to it because it still comes out and you have to like break off the little chunks that make it. I'm not a 3D printer, so I'm not the best at explaining this. But basically it comes out and there's little like tether points to it that hold it so when it prints it doesn't like just go bleh.
Just fall apart. So you have to kind of like gently and carefully remove those, almost kind of like you're breaking it out of a mold, but like it's just a way different experience.
So then you got to like sand it down and finish it and stuff. So yeah, you could 3D print the pendant. You could resin cast it. So resin casting has been a really big thing, especially in the dice circles right now because of its accessibility. So
it's very toxic, though, from what I understand. Like, so when I say toxic, I'm not talking about like, oh man, Twitter's toxic. No, like poisonous. Like, don't ingest. Make sure you have a mask on and gloves
Yep.
and all that stuff, because it's something you don't want to mess with.
Yep. And then the last option that I looked at is there's a woman that I work with in Washington who does hand-blown glass. And to me, I was like, if budget's not really an option or not like a consideration, let's make it out of glass. Let's use a foiling. Let's do a custom mold for it. And let's work with this woman who basically, she has a glass shop. Her name is Lael Bennett. She is the nicest lady. She has like 3 dogs in her shop. I would die for her. She's incredible. And so what we did is she went through and I sent her a bunch of reference images and basically produced a bunch of different variants of what the end product would be. So this is the roughest one.
Oh, wow.
Where you can see that the shape isn't quite right. We didn't have the definition on the little bits that we wanted. It's a little bit blobby. Color wasn't quite right, but it was a really good first test. So we were testing to see, can you use foil on the back of this and get a design that looks somewhat sharp? And we're like, okay, yes, proof of concept. We know that glass is going to work. It's just going to take some fiddling. So then it's wrapped in a bunch of tissue paper so don't break it. So then we went into color variations. Do we want it to be darker? Do we want it to be lighter? And you can see that we refined the way that the points work, and you can see it's just sharper. It looks cleaner. The shape is a little bit better. So we got those parts down, and then we're like, okay, do we want the sigil to be inside of it? So it's a little bit harder to see, but it is, yeah, you can't see it from the side.
It's not on the outside. It's completely immersed in the glass.
Yep. So do we want it to be that? No. And what we settled on was, this one is a damaged one. So this is the defect from it. But we settled on this really dark blood red that you can't see it from the back, but it's a little bit, it's flat. And that's how we wound up with this little guy. So it is on top. It's not damaged. It's that really deep, like blood red, I guess, was the end goal. It's got the sharp edges. It's a little bit flatter. You can see like the size difference from where we started to where we ended.
Oh yeah, that's significantly smaller.
Mm-hmm. And so then the thing became, okay, we've got this pendant. How are we going to mount it? And that's just a matter of going to the different jewelry websites that I, A, spend too much money on, and B, lurk way too frequently on, and finding a sheet of copper that we basically cut in this shape and then just folded over. So like little tabs. It wasn't like the fanciest arrangement, because if you wanted to, you could do like a full on, I guess bezel is the best way to put it. But you could make it fit sort of like how my ring is. That camera is not going to focus. You could basically make it fit so it nests really neatly, but we just did like a thing where it folded up over it and then it had like a little jump ring on it.
Almost kind of like the back of like a picture frame where you're kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. I
exactly.
understand.
So yeah, it's I would say most products that get made, if it's a product that I haven't made before, usually go through 2 to 5 rounds of revision, depending on like how picky are we, how much is the budget, how much do we care about being. I mean, that deals back with picky, like what hills are we gonna die on today? And every client is a little bit different with what they care about. In this case, we wanted that darker red, we wanted that really bright gold, and so it took, I think, 7 to 10, honestly, on this, but that was because we made multiples at the same time.
Are you inclined to do more revisions of products if the cost of said product is incredibly inexpensive? Like, where it's like, we have the freedom to kind of really delve into getting this right versus like a higher budget item, or is that completely irrelevant?
It depends. I am picky, and so if given all of the money in the world and all of the time in the world, like if there's no budget constraints and there's no time constraints, I'm gonna die on that hill of, I want it to be exactly what both of us want. If it's not exactly what both of us want, then I'm not gonna be happy with it. Like, it's still gonna get made, but and like the thing that I've had to get used to in the last year is like, no one's gonna know what it could have looked like. No one really understands the manufacturing process, so like I'm really the only one that's gonna be disappointed, and I just need to suck it up. That's
Well, I mean, I don't think that's entirely true because the person that can be disappointed can also be the client themselves, right?
Yes.
Like, so you want to make sure that everyone's expectations are, to the best of everyone's ability, being met.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So like, going back to like say falling guillotine. So if we're doing a 6-foot sword, there's a bunch of questions that I would ask beforehand. Like if someone came to me and straight up said like, I want a 6-foot sword, it's like, great. How are you going to store it? Are you going to put it on your wall?
Oh boy.
Are you going to mass produce it? If you're going to mass produce it, does your storage facility have the room? What box are you going to ship it in? How much are you going to charge for it? There's all sorts of questions because that becomes, if your storage facility like charges per square foot, if that falling guillotine doesn't sell, then you have, you're going to have to make minimum 300. You've got some very expensive paperweights that are just sitting there taking up money. But again, we're assuming that, everything is going to work out beautifully. So if I wasn't going straight to like Vulpin props or something like that, it would be, okay, do you want to 3D print it? Going back to Mamaki, the print beds might not be big enough. And so you'd probably have to print it in chunks, right? So you have the tip, I would split it into 3 parts. So you have the half of the blade, the other half of the blade, and then the mounting and the hilt.
Gotcha.
So what I would do is I would reach out to 3D modelers in the community. I never like to work with agencies or when I say other businesses, I mean big businesses.
Like like large corporations. Yes. I understand.
Exactly. So I would try to find somebody, especially if it's a fandom adjacent product, I try to find someone within that community who is doing 3D renderings, who has this experience and would jump at the chance to, at least in my case, work with the official brand. How do I bring them into it and then leverage that connection? Be like, hey, this super fan of yours did this product. How do we give credit? How do we make sure that they, we shout from the rooftops that they did this really cool thing? So
all of this sounds absurdly complicated. And if I'm being honest, like I kind of figured it was going to be a little like taxing. I never once thought it was going to be all these questions, like how are you going to store it? Like, what are you going to do with leftovers? Do you have leftovers? All that kind of stuff are things that never once have ever crossed my mind about, like, any merchandising. So, how do you start even, like, conquering that? Like, are there, like, deal breakers during the situation to where it's, like, there is, during the conversation, you kind of have, like, a breakdown to where it's, like, we just simply can't. The expectations are simply beyond reality. Like, not that they're, like, being insane, but it's, like, maybe they don't know as much. Maybe it's, like, me, right? I don't know all things going into it. I come to you with this product that I'm really excited about, and then like the budget and all of your follow-up questions, just there's no way to make it all work together. Like, where do you go from there?
Honestly, it's making it smaller. 90% of the time, if you just make it smaller, that solves a lot of the problems. It solves your packaging problem. It solves your storage problem. It solves budget problems. Usually what happens is the exception would be like if something is electronic, I just don't mess with electronics if I can help it. I can tell the story about exploding Morden later, but there are so many things that can go wrong with electronics and batteries that my hard and fast rule is I don't want to touch it. So that's why I would outsource falling guillotine to Vulpin Props or somebody, because they can do all the electronic stuff.
All the lighting and the stuff like that go alongside of it.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, I have to ask about what do you mean by exploding Morden? Which I assume Morden's Solus from Mass Effect 2
yes.
/3.
So, batteries are the devil. They make a lot of things work and they're super fun, but there are so many things that can go wrong with batteries. If you don't know where the batteries are sourced from, have you ever gotten a battery and it's just shit? Oh, can we curse? Ooh. It's just bad.
It's okay. To be fair, I never told you one way or the other. It's fine. You're fine. This is an adult program. If there are kids watching, don't say that word.
Forcibly ejected from T's Discord, or not Discord, T's Twitch. So batteries. If they're just bad quality batteries, you know how they get like leak and they get that like crusty film situation on it. Sourcing batteries is a nightmare. Where did your batteries come from? Is there
Sorry, this is a really dumb thing I'm just thinking about. Is this why, like, most things that when you get them do not come with batteries, where it says batteries not included because it's a nightmare?
Yeah.
I always thought it was because they were lazy. I'm such a fool.
No,
I was like, why wouldn't you include batteries in this?
Yeah. And it's also because you have to have special, so like our storage facility, they can't touch batteries. The fire marshal has to give approvals. You have to have a whole different insurance policy because batteries explode. And if batteries are in a plush, like say the Singing Morden plush that we did with BioWare, and someone, you know, maybe puts the batteries in the wrong way and then just leaves it, those batteries explode.
Man, that's well, you know, that's one way to that's one way for Morden to go, I guess. Oh,
yeah,
man.
it's of all the characters too. Like, well,
yeah,
buddy.
the one like least deserving of being exploded via batteries.
Yep.
Oh man.
So it's one of those things where it's just easier to leave it to the folks that buy the batteries, and that's why it becomes a huge pain, especially if the electronics require that you use a certain kind of battery. I've kicked projects back where I was like, I don't know what kind of battery that is. I cannot walk into a Rite Aid or a Walgreens or a Menards and get a battery because I don't know what that is. So we have to use a different set of electronics, because if somebody can't put a battery in it, you just made a product that's a very fancy paperweight.
So just kind of on like the dangers of like of either producing or making some of these things. Is there ever any kind of like this is a little like dark to discuss, but like, so a lot of gaming products and a lot of gaming props people want to get made are like weapons. Are there any kind of like concerns with either working with either customs, let's say perhaps, or like mass producing something that can be visually seen as a weapon, even if it's like, let's say it's plush, like a plush gun? Like, is there any kind of consideration that goes into, all right, do we need to worry about, you know, this product going out and being used irresponsibly? Like, how does that play into this whole process?
I would say that I'm a little bit different than a lot of folks. If at all possible, I just don't make anything related to guns. Okay. Same with anything related to police, same with anything related to military or anything like that. Regardless of like clients and stuff, clients will sometimes be like, no, I want this, it's a part of my brand, or, you know, it's whatever. But I, wherever possible, try to move away from that sort of thing. That said,
I completely understand.
That said, you know, if I had the chance to make like a Destiny replica, I would absolutely do it, because that would be dope. There's all sorts of weird things, and it depends on the countries. So there's a couple different, it's been a very long day and I'm forgetting what it is, but there's like ASTM and CPSIA is the letters for it. But basically it's like the testing and certification things that say my product is not full of needles or drugs or
it is
flammable materials. Yes. And so you have to do that testing. I'm not going to say have to, actually. It is very much encouraged, if you would like to sell your products and not run into problems with customs, that you get your, let's say, plush certified by a, you know, testing facility that is reputable. There are non-reputable testing facilities, and if you get them tested by them, customs is like, who the fuck are these guys? Like, what is this? So we basically
all it says is this product is fine, signed my dad. I don't.
Yeah.
Is this okay?
Exactly.
Can I bring this into the country? Oh yeah, sure. Just come on in.
It's fine. Just bring it in. It's fine. So any kind of replicas, like I said, I don't generally do them, so I'm not sure if. I would have to assume that if you have a historical presence creating prop replicas, there's probably not too many issues, especially if you can prove that it doesn't have a firing mechanism. But, you know, like Nerf, all of their stuff is super brightly colored, and there's probably like a bazillion regulations that they have to go through, especially for something that fires. And my guess is they probably went through hundreds of thousands of dollars of safety testing just for like the exact firmness and squishiness of those Nerf darts to make it compliant with whatever places they're selling it in.
I feel like my brain just went through like years and years of like complaining about, like when I was younger, I used to get really annoyed with Nerf stuff because it was really expensive, like when I was growing up. And you know, I came from like a lower income household, so maybe it's not super shared, but like I really liked playing with Nerf stuff, but it was always really hard for me to be able to afford. I feel like now I have an understanding of why maybe it cost as much as it did, because like on top of obviously the manufacturing processes, which is just, you know, you're throwing money at just like plastics and foam and
injection molding, labor, and then setting up the molding, and
and all that stuff. It's also just being like potentially paying for numerous licenses or something like that, where it's like, hey, this is a firing mechanism not designed to bring harm and stuff like that. I never once thought that would be this really incredibly complicated process, but obviously it is. Now, like, I feel, once again, I feel very foolish. I have these misconceptions. They're very wrong. I'm coming to understand about just, like, products in general. Okay. Man, that makes me wonder a lot. So is it difficult to work with, let's say, a brand that wants to, let's say, make a product out of state, or sorry, out of the country, like out of the United States? Is that an issue for you?
Honestly, it's more difficult for if someone wants to make it in the country. There's basically, the amount of product that I can manufacture in the United States is negligible.
Interesting. Do you mean just like period, or like things you can make and then send out of the United States, or that also mean like selling inside the United States as well?
Selling in the United States is usually not too much of an issue, because if you're, for example, t-shirts, there's screen print shops are a dime a dozen. You can get them done. There's it's like Starbucks, right? Like there's one on every corner to some extent if you're looking around.
Yeah.
But taking, let's say, plush, the only time I've ever been able to get plush manufactured domestically was by working with an individual plush artist. And I generally tend to go for, and I feel like people make jokes every time I say this, but like furry artists, if at all possible, whenever I can, I hire a furry artist to do my sewing if I have to do individual items, because their sewing skills are just absolutely incredible. And they're so good at figuring out, how do I do this curvature? How do I stuff it so that it is nice to squish, and how do I make it something that, you know, works? And they have all of the connections to, like, I mean, really furry websites, right? Where they get the fursuit materials from. A lot of that is the same stuff that you use on plush. So that makes it tricky. Clothing, like we're working on a project right now trying to do domestic clothing manufacturing. And it was, I want to say it was like $2,000 for the tech pack. And the tech pack is basically somebody building a sample of the thing and then telling, you know, the measurement. My collar is 35 inches. The waist is 45 inches. The material we're using is this. So a tech pack is basically like your roadmap to how to make this thing. $2,000 just to get that. Then going to manufacturers, we've spent 4 weeks talking to different manufacturers, and that's man hours. That's probably another couple $1,000s just in terms of my time and my team's time. And then you've got finding the manufacturer, and it's $8,000 just to get them to make samples and check that the grading is right, check that the patterns are something that they can work with, check that the tech pack actually makes sense to what we want to make. And we haven't even made a product. We haven't even sold anything yet. So like, it's honestly prohibitively expensive for a lot of folks to make anything domestic. Whereas if I just go to China and send it to one of my manufacturers, I say, hey, here's a tech pack. Here's 3 fabric swatches. We're looking for these kind of things. Can you just copy this? And it's so much easier. It is. And you're going to run into issues, you know, especially with, I don't speak Chinese, unfortunately. But they speak English much better than I do Chinese. And so there's pros and cons to everything.
Well, I know that like in that kind of situation, like just kind of anything in production for China, like we're not gonna get super political, but like, you know, that is one of the selling points of like how they run their country, is that, you know, for example, right now we're having a port issue due to like, you know, the like coronavirus stuff changing, and people are able to buy goods more. There's an increase in demand, so people are ordering stuff kind of at the same time, so ports are getting a little clogged. There's a lot of other issues there too. But for like the US, due to how regulated a lot of these things are, it's like, okay, let's say you want to make a new port to receive goods. It's going to be, you know, you go out and it's like a multi-year process just to get the land. And then it's going to be, you know, getting all the staffing for it. And then it's going to be making it and getting all the products. So it's this, that, and the other. But like, yeah, like you said, for China, that situation's like, no, they're just going to like go and like either take the land and then just use it, or, you know, it'll get done just immediately. So I can definitely understand why there would be I guess more friction, you could call it, for trying to deal with like creating things domestically than abroad.
And it's interesting too, like in China we're encountering a slew of different issues where our pin manufacturing places, their electricity is getting turned off because COVID is making it so that natural gas, which is what powers a lot of stuff, is super expensive. And so they're conserving electricity, which means that instead of operating Monday through Friday, they're operating Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Or, you know, port shortages are a thing, right? So all of those containers that are out in the water right now, that means that those containers are out of circulation. So there are no more metal containers to take my stuff. So
Yeah.
it's super fun.
Yeah, for those who don't know right now, I like I said, I just touched on it, but there is, on top of there being like labor strikes across the U.S., which I'm personally in support
Hell
of
yeah,
for
hell
unions
yeah.
and stuff like, yeah, okay, good. For like unions and stuff, for better wages, stuff like that. The problem that like really isn't solvable, at least for how the U.S. operates, is the port shortages. Is that like we don't have a way of dealing with that. I think like one of the best options I've heard so far is like, I don't even know how they go about it, but just like making ports 24 hours. But then you run into like hiring everybody to cover those and being safe because like you're operating this big machines and making sure that no one's gonna accidentally smash somebody with a giant crate. So it's this really big problem. There's not really, I mean, there is a solution, but it's not necessarily a simple one. And it's also one that like, so let's say as a small business owner like yourself, like you don't really have any way of dealing with that. So like how, which I guess I might as well just ask, like how rough has the past roughly year and a half, now almost 2 years, been for just like working on stuff? Not talking about like level of business, but just functionally finishing products. Has it been a lot more difficult?
I guess this is somewhat political. I started my company basically the year that Trump became president.
Sure.
And everything that happened there with the tariffs and the trade war with China, it has been a nonstop nightmare just trying to get anything manufactured. And so then adding COVID on top of that, like, I am very grateful and blessed that I have clients who understand. None of my clients are like, I have to have this thing right now. I have to. If I don't, then the world is going to end. So I think we've done a really good job, especially, I mean, my team honestly has done a really good job basically communicating to folks, here are the expectations. We're going to aim for January, but like realistically, it may be March because, you know, February is Lunar New Year. And so I think everybody is used to everything just being like a nightmare. And so like all of our folks are really, really understanding with like, hey, the boat got stuck in the canal. I can't fly there.
Everyone's memeing about it, but over here I am crying. I am sobbing about this boat.
Yeah. So I'm very grateful that the people that we work with are very understanding with the pitfalls of globalization being like, yeah, if one thing goes wrong, you're just boned.
Yeah. I mean, so we're talking about like merchandising and products. I do think that like this is, no matter what, you can't avoid the quote unquote political conversation because you're talking about trade, and trade is an international thing, and that every country deals with trade differently. Like tariffs are a thing that is inherently political, but like that is a large part of this discussion. So like, you know, I don't know what to tell people when they say like, oh, I can't believe we're talking about politics on this gaming merchandising podcast. I'm like, well, it's trade. Trade is inherently political. I'm sorry to tell you this. Buying and selling goods is complicated, and the government wants to be a part of it.
Yep.
So yeah. Okay. So aside from potentially how incredibly like rough the past like, you know, year and a, I guess actually, so you when did you start your company? Actually, now that I think about it.
We registered all the paperwork in 2017. And I think we launched, I should know this, but like the dates. I believe we launched in 2018. I want to say like June or July, but all the paperwork and stuff, like the official birthday is like August 17th of 2017.
Gotcha. What was your first product you made?
I'm an insane person, and we made like 30 to start. So we basically built out the entire storefront. I love suffering. So we did like a bunch of enamel pins, and like we did just really basic stuff. So with starting the storefront, my biggest requirement, I guess, and my own requirement to myself, was that we have an assortment of products. So we had apparel, we had enamel pins, and then we had bags, because those were the three things that resonated really well with the fan base that we wanted to have, rather than trying to appeal to the entirety of, like, say, the gaming market. So yeah, we did custom Ida bags, which I think have fallen a little bit out of favor now because everybody started doing them, and so it's kind of a they did really well.
You said Ida bags?
Yes.
I feel dumb. What are those?
No, it's okay. So it is a bag that started in Japan, and basically it's a bag with a window that you put your pins in.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So we did basically a version of it that allows you to remove that flap. And so you can change out the thing that you want. It's basically like if you had a picture frame that you carried with you, but you could change out the picture at any point.
Sure, I understand.
Yeah, so that was probably the, I guess, flagship product that we did. We did like a coffin-shaped one with some spiky bits, and then we did one with the reversible functionality in it. And so we've got a couple others. My dream is to make someday convention gear. So specifically travel gear for streamers and for cosplayers. So suitcases that are custom made for, here's where your wigs go, here's where your camera stuff goes, here's where,
cool.
I've been working on it for like the last 3 years and it takes forever, but
I mean,
someday.
I mean, I know numerous people who I think would love something like that, so I understand. It's something you definitely want to get right, because I feel like in that situation, like if you get it wrong, like you might ruin someone's, on top of like inexperience, you're gonna potentially ruin like something that took them a lot of, you know, TLC to create as well. So
yes, indeed.
What would you say is the most challenging product you've made? So we started off with like, you know, like, oh, we've had like enamel pins, which maybe are a little more straightforward. What is something that maybe it was exciting for you, maybe it was a nightmare, but what was the most challenging thing that you've made?
It's under NDA.
That's fine. What was the most non-NDA challenging thing that you have done?
Sword. So for people, if there's anybody in the chat who's read Tamora Pierce, Tamora Pierce is a young adult novelist that I grew up on. Basically, it's the story that everyone probably knows if they've heard the name is the Song of the Lioness, which is basically fantasy universe. The first woman knight. She masquerades as a boy, masquerades as her twin brother to go become a knight, and then it comes out and but she has a magic sword because of course she does. And that process was probably the most complicated because book merch, actually, you know what? Book merch is the most complicated simply because what you envision when you were reading that thing that you picture, it could be entirely different from what the writer pictured and what another person pictured. And one of the things that we encounter, especially with book merch, is that's not canon accurate. It's like, to what, dude? Like all of the, I mean,
this is the official merch. How is it not canon accurate? I don't understand.
Yup. But then, looking at the covers of the books, every different region has a different artist, which has a different take on it. And so the sword for Alana was different on every single fucking cover. So what was canon?
Yeah.
So we worked with an artist named Alyssa Maynard. Maynard? I'm so sorry, Alyssa, if you're watching. We worked with a lovely artist named Alyssa, and they basically drew up a bunch of different variations, taking all of the covers into account, taking, all of the reference materials from the book. And from there, we said, okay, we like this pommel, we like this stone, we like this hilt, we like this part of the blade, we like this little, I don't remember what the actual term is, but the little fiddly bit that's around the hilt. And then we want these things on the blade itself. Maybe.
Fiddly
Yeah,
bit.
that sounds right.
You said fiddly bit, and I wasn't looking directly at you, so I don't entirely know what we're talking about. I'm just assuming maybe it's the guard. I don't know.
Yeah, that sounds right. So we got that done, and then I found a 3D modeler who I am so sorry, I'm blanking on their name. Their name is Courtney. I can find their info later. But we went to them and said, hey, let's 3D model this, and then 3D printing it. And so what I did is I took those and then we shrunk them down super, super small and made little earrings out of them. And the reason, outside of like transforming intangible, no actual official reference image item into a physical thing, the other thing is like jewelry. I stabbed those tiny little swords under my nails so many, not intentionally, but like trying to sand them down.
I appreciate it.
Jewelry, any kind of jewelry, if there's one thing that I could harp on, is that jewelry busts your fingers up. You are working with toxic chemicals. You half the time, you should be wearing gloves, but like you can't get into like sand this obnoxious little part if you're wearing gloves, and it just beats your hands up.
I don't know the term for it, but like, so I despise working with like really tiny things. Like, it gives me like anxiety and frustration thinking about a task that's like relatively easy, but I have to like get really close to it. It's very precise. Like, cause I just want to shatter it. Like, I just get angry. Yeah. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. It reminds me of when I try to, okay. Side note. I don't mind doing laundry, but if I despise hanging my laundry and folding it. It makes me so just irrationally upset. That feeling I get for that is me with small objects where I'm trying to like, what's a good example?
Like assembling Gundams or Legos.
So I like Legos because Legos are big enough, but you mentioned Gundams. I used to assemble Zoids, and I would consistently assemble them wrong because I would get annoyed and then skip steps because child. So yeah, I learned that I probably could do it now. I think I have like more zen and patience now I did than I maybe 5-10 plus years ago. But yeah, like I can't imagine sitting in like a room being like a jeweler and having to like do the same repetitive task over and over again. I would just run. I'd go to the mountains. Just leave.
Yeah.
It's goodbye. I have a goat to befriend. I'll see you later.
Yep. And so like with those earrings, so they're like this big, and if you mess it up and you bend that sword, you can't sell that one. And if you got them cast in sterling silver, that's like $150 that you just ruined. And then if you do that repeatedly, then you don't have enough to like matchy so you can sell earrings. Mm-hmm. And so like you just trash, $20 worth of goods on accident.
Is there a term for like when you during the manufacturing process, at any part of the step where you ruin a good? Is there a term for that, like an overarching term?
There might be, but effing it up.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know if there's an actual term.
I didn't know if there's like a statistical thing where it's like, I know that when I worked at retail, they called like stealing things was shrink. Like I didn't know if an adjacent term for like goods that went bad at some point.
There's, defect ratio is generally what we would call it. So like, what's the ratio of, goods that are okay and then goods that are defective? And that's where you'll see, like, especially indie artist alley folks, you'll see that they're listing A grade, B grade, and C grade. So C grade being there's, flex in the enamel pin, or there's a fill missing, or there's something wrong with it. And A grade being it's a perfect, everything turned out how it was supposed to.
Gotcha. Okay. So I really want to know the NDA stuff, but that's just because I'm curious by nature. I'm not going to get you in trouble. So kind of pulling back to like the business owner side of things, how large is your company? Like how many people work with or for you?
So I have 7 part or full-time employees. Mm-hmm. It's probably going to be 9 by the end of the year, realistically speaking. Mm-hmm. And then freelancers, I've worked with probably 100 plus at this point, just over the last 4 or 5 years. I try to work with, and that seems like a lot, but it's intentional. So a lot of what I try to do is I try to match independent artists with the brands that I work with, and then usually try not to work with the same person more than once, because the easiest example, right, is San Diego Comic-Con wants examples of things that you've done in the industry. You need credits for that. Most merchandise companies, they don't list their credits. They don't tell you what artist did that piece of merchandise. They're not gonna share that. And so a lot of why I try to work with so many people is so that I can get them credits to use for conventions, or apply with on their resumes, so they don't have to answer a question with, oh, that's under NDA, I can't show you. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I work with a bunch of people.
Is that a common thing for like large corporations that, let's say, work with a merchandising company, is that they just kind of cut them out of the, like, I guess you could say, marketing side of things?
Oh, like 99% of them.
That's rough. I guess it's especially rough because it seems like a lot of what you do is word of mouth plus, kind of like bona fides, right? So even if you, let's say you work with like an enormous company, so let's say like Microsoft asks you saying, hey, we need you to make a life-size Master Chief, and you make that Master Chief. Is it often that people can even like say that they were the one who made it, or is that also just like a no-go?
It depends on the thing, but more often than not, you sign away the rights to ever talk about you making that thing.
That's so rough.
It's real messed up. And that's why so many merchandiser folks, they have to have like password protected portfolios, and you have to sign an NDA to get access to their portfolio to find out what projects they've worked on, so you can figure out if you need to hire them.
What's the reason for that?
Partially. So some of it is because I would say a significant chunk of what people do just never sees the light of day. So especially like I'm trying to be careful about what I say and how I say it.
I
Some
completely
companies,
understand. Take your time.
they will commission 10 different items. And then the reason they commission those 10 different items is because they're just going to show it to the client, to the IP holder, and say, which one do you want? And then those other 9 items don't exist. They never see the light of day. Even if they were excellent, even if they were perfect executions of whatever the vision was, they pick one. And so that art doesn't get reverted back to the artist, generally speaking. That is just something that, Mr. John Microsoft just owns, and it sits in a vault for forever. But like you're doing, and that's if you're paid for it. Like a lot of these companies, they'll be like, we'll give you $50 to do a full design. No, not even saying if we're going to use it. And that's $50 is in some cases good. It's not good. To be clear, that's bullshit money. You are taking advantage of artists and you're a bad person. But that is good for the industry,
Sure.
$250, $500. And it's like, you're going to sell that mass market. You're going to pull $100,000 on that. And you're going to give them $500.
Well, I mean, there is definitely a conversation too about like capital owners and labor that I won't super get into, but I would say if you are interested in that topic, I would look at the United States labor shortage right now and the relation to the strikes going on. If you want to know more about that specific situation, so it how do I ask this? So it seems, I guess let's ask more for clarification. So it sounds like the good reason as to why, let's say, you said John Microsoft decides to not show off products 1 through 9, but only number 10, is because I would wager that they don't want to deal with like the fallout of like, let's say, I don't know, Polygon, Kotaku, somebody gets IGN gets a wing or a smell of, oh, it turns out that Microsoft is creating a life-size purchasable, X, Y, or Z, and they aren't. They just have like the proof of it, and it never went past that point. So is the good part of that trying to like prevent customer disappointment?
I mean, yeah, there's probably some of that for like managing customer expectations, or sometimes you just kill something because it's going to cost you $20,000 to get it done the way that you want it, and you're just like, that's sunk cost. Like, we're not going to make a profit. It's not something it's not the Xbox fridge that is so dumb it's perfect. Like, so there are some cases where they just hide it because then you don't. Actually, yeah. I mean, now that I'm thinking about it specifically, is you would just deal with the delusion of customers being like, why didn't you make this? Why didn't you make a life-size falling guillotine? And it's like, well, people don't want to pay $1,500 for a 6-foot sword that they can't mount on their wall because the wall isn't strong enough.
Do you think that's a conversation that's like worth having, like as a whole across, not even the games industry, but just like the merchandising industry, is being more open and apparent with like costs of these things? Because I feel like this has always been my opinion, because I feel like I'm always more understanding when I'm less ignorant versus the opposite.
Yep.
But I completely understand that is not the case for everyone, where some people, they don't care to learn about like the back end of their hobby. That's such a like a consistent thing in the gaming industry, is that not that people are angry about like how the sausage gets made, so to speak, but just are just generally disinterested and don't seek it out. And because of that, I feel like that creates a lot of friction. So it just feels strange to me that knowing all of this, why wouldn't we be more open and apparent about it? But I guess that the answer is that, it reminds me a lot of Men in Black. I think it was like the first one where they're talking about like a person is smart, educated, and a critical thinker, but people are panicky, scared, and dumb. And I'm like, I kind of get that. It's the mob mentality, right? Yep. And Twitter and social media in general does not help with that.
Yeah, it's gamers, gamers with a capital G. So the interesting thing about that, right, is take me for example. Mm-hmm. My finances aren't available anywhere. Nobody knows how much money I make. Nobody knows. I mean, like they might be able to put it together. Like I live in Portland and I don't have a car, so like I'm doing okay. I don't know. But taking like the products, for example, that I make, if I made 500 plush, if I said, yeah, I made 500 plush, I got it manufactured overseas, All of the costs are available, and it comes out that plush is $11.95 to make, but I am selling that plush for $45. That just becomes, why are you overcharging?
True.
Why are you charging so much?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, we only sell 5 of this plush per quarter. And so I need to make up for that storage fee. So like there's a bunch of invisible costs that you can't really explain and can't detail out.
Yeah.
That being said, for Among Us, one of the things that I'm going to be doing, because the lovely Forrest has given his blessing, is Forrest on the inner south side, is explaining exactly how much it costs to get these ding dang plush into the United States. I have been working with, we work with a place called Bourne Logistics to do all of our importing, and they file like ISF forms and all that crap. Do you want to take a guess? You might have actually seen it on Twitter, so it might not be a guess, but do you want to take a guess on how much it normally costs to ship 600 plush by air?
From air? Where? Where are we going?
From China to Port of Seattle.
$3,000.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it could be around that. Yeah, it's depending on how heavy they are. Yeah, anywhere from 1,500 to 5,000. Yeah, that's a good range.
Right in the middle. Nailed it.
Yeah, it's 4 times that right now.
I thought I was a smart boy. Okay.
Right now, it's absolutely it's $137,000 for me to airship 6,000 plush to get it in time for holiday. So, so instead we're spending what was it? I've looked at so many numbers.
Are you chartering a boat? Like, I feel like that'd be cheaper.
I looked into it. So when I first, when the pandemic first started happening, I was literally looking at chartering planes and boats to get masks into the United States because everything was so backed up, and that's a whole other effing nightmare. But yeah, the point that I'm ultimately getting at is that most clients just don't want to deal with the headache of gamers with a capital G being like, why are you doing your finances this way? Because then you have to explain, like, people cost money, and if you pay 100% of their benefits and you pay them well, your products cost money.
It's not wrong to say, even for me, that's like it's hard to wrap your mind around, like, you know, total costs of X, Y, and Z, you know. Yep. Like, because at the end of the day, all you see is like potentially. So let's say I work at retail and I, know how much like a cable costs versus how much you sell it for. All you know is those two numbers. You don't understand. There's no context around anything else around that product aside from, oh, it's marked up 500%. But like the reason for that could be, I mean, it could be corporate greed, but it also could be the fact that like you mentioned that, like, potentially tariffs and import costs of other kinds, maybe even just like physical shipping, the warehouse, all that kind of stuff that just kind of piles on that final price tag.
Yep.
Like, it would be actually really fascinating if there was a way to like easily pick up a product, let's say I have this I don't know, I have this helmet, right, like I showed earlier. Like, it'd be interesting knowing like how much this costs for like each step of the way, like how much like percent wise this pushed up that cost. Granted, that's like an impossibility, right? Like, it's not easily to find knowledge for someone like me, yeah. And I also don't know if you should be unfortunately, and I guess is the other part of the conversation, is that people like to weaponize knowledge sometimes. So maybe being in the dark is better than knowing the truth for things like consumer costs and stuff like that.
Yep, and it's something that I have to constantly weigh in terms of how much do I give? How much info can I give?
Yeah.
Some of our partners don't want any of that stuff out. In some cases, we are allowed to share it. So, like I said, with the plush, once we launch Among Us plush, I'm gonna have to explain, like, hey, we got a restock of a thing. I know they were $20 before, but actually the shipping is $19 per unit. That's not even the manufacturing cost. So now my plush costs as much to get into the country as I was selling it for. And so I'm gonna have to explain that to, again, capital G gamers. It's very interesting, but it's a bit of a tightrope walk sometimes.
Yeah, I don't envy that. Like, that sounds incredibly stressful. Like, I don't do well with confrontation. I never have. I'm a little baby. I'm a little baby man who doesn't like to get into arguments if I can prevent it. Okay. So now that like a lot of the heavy stuff that we just kind of accidentally, I should say I accidentally landmined myself onto, were you one of the folks who helped make that, like, I don't even know how to describe it. You know those like inflatable dinosaur things where it's like you see someone like doing that? You know there's like one of those for Among Us. Is that you? Was that you? Did you do that?
So that wasn't me specifically. So quick, how does merchandising work in terms of licensing? So you'll notice that there's unlicensed merchandise, which is the slew of just everybody and their mother who made unlicensed plush. They didn't have a contract. They didn't sign paperwork with me. They just made some plush and mass produced it overseas and then distributed it. And then you've got licensed plush. Licensed plush, you basically go through this entire process where in this case, you have to talk to me, womp womp. So you come to me and say, hey, I am let's use clothes. I am a clothing manufacturer. I have distribution into X, Y, I have Walmart, Target, and Spencer's. I operate in these regions. Sometimes an IP holder will charge what's called a minimum guarantee. And that minimum guarantee is basically an assurance that regardless of whether or not that product does well, the IP holder got their money. They don't give them whatever. So in this case, Toyketo came to us and was like, hey, we're a new company. We have this prior history. We used to work on this. We used to work on this. We used to work on this. We're interested in doing these products. And so we worked together to get a contract signed. In that contract, we said, okay, you have toys, and some of them get really granular. Some of them are like, you can produce a toy, but it has to be this plastic and it has to be this size, and you can't make it above this size. Some of them
sounds like a test.
Yeah. Yep. So in this case, Toyketo came to us and said, hey, we're looking at making an inflatable crewmate. We spent so much time on the shape of that effing backpack.
I had never heard the name of that until you said inflatable crewmate, and that is a name that's a name. Continue.
Yep. So a lot of it was like, how do we make the shape of the backpack look right? Because the backpack is, without sounding silly, it's kind of an iconic shape in terms of making sure that it looks like a backpack and not a tumor on the back of your inflatable thing. Yeah. And then it was, okay, how do you get the visor to be big enough to, see out of, but how do you make it look like the game? And you can't, right? Because you can't see out of it if you make it entirely game accurate. And so Toyketo basically has two variants. They have one that is that shiny, it's called polyurethane, but it's that shiny, like holographic one if you're an adult. And then for the kids, it's basically like a thing that you stick your head through. And then you can just see out of it. So like kids aren't tripping and falling and walking into traffic.
Yes.
Because that's bad. So yeah, they basically went back and forth, and then they were like, okay, so there's gonna be two sizes, and we had them send us swatch books of all the different kinds of plastic that are used so that we could find the exact right match to, what color plastic are we using for the Among Us skin, for the inflatable costume itself.
The Among Us skin.
Made with real skinned crewmates. I
want to be at that meeting. Yes, we want to go with the deep red for the crewmate skin in the inflatable crewmate. Is that possible?
Yep. That's a lot of that, right? So like looking at the mesh, we picked the mesh color. And so it gets really, really, really granular. But yes, Toyketo is the one who did that.
So you mentioned that you got like a swatch of plastics. Is that more than just visual, or is that also like you will like touch them as well, to where you kind of know what they feel like, or is that a separate process?
Yep. No, it's the same. So for the squeaking nug plush that we did for BioWare, we ordered like 5 different kinds of squeakers, and then spent like a solid afternoon like, if I stepped on a nug, like
if I stepped on a nug. Yep.
And so we found different kinds of squeakers, and then we sent those squeakers off to BioWare, and we're like, hey, which squeaker do you like the best? And it's not everybody is like that. Like I probably am, per our previous conversation, I am both paranoid and anxious. And so I do things much, much, much more extra than I need to.
Meticulously is the word.
Yes.
That is a positive affirmation, is you are very meticulous.
Yes. So I wash all of the samples that we get when and where possible, but I wash them like 5 times. Does the print quality hold up? Does the design retain its color fastness, color does the color stay? Does it start to flake? Does it start to bleed? Did it ruin anything in my wash? Because that's happened. And so it's a lot of that testing and making sure that like, is this something that, because like realistically, sustainable, someone saying that their stuff's sustainable, they're full of shit. Nothing is sustainable. If you are making product and selling it, you are not sustainable. You are making stuff in it, by and large, I should say most, I'm not talking about like Patagonia, for example. I think that they probably spend a significant amount of money making sure that like it's sustainably made and whatever, but you're always going to have waste. You're using water. Like if you're making stuff with cotton takes a bunch of different water, but if you're using this other thing, it still takes, like, capitalism is a thing and you can't get away from that. Yeah. But there are small choices that you can make to make something more sustainable or more ethical than just going to the lowest common denominator and buying a thing.
I mean, I also think that, like, I don't know, I can't speak for all consumers, but I know that I personally do appreciate, like, the time and the effort that's get put into something that's not just kind of, like, hacky, you know?
Yep.
It's very easy to, like, I mean, we've all gotten that, like, gift from, like, someone who doesn't really know you that well at Christmas or something like that, to where it's like, here, I got you, you said you liked Among Us, here, and it's like among like we is like the brand name, and it's just like this like cheap plastic that like probably like it's actually radioactive somehow that they got like somewhere else. So I don't know. I'd like to think that people are appreciative of the process of being meticulous, not even just on top of like it being sustainable, which is I think a growing needed conversation right around just like consumerism as a whole. But also just that, like, they're getting a quality good. Because, I mean, I've been let down plenty of times where I will order a thing because I don't really know where to get that thing. So I'll go maybe to, like, a third-party website or who knows where. That looks right, and you can't really find anywhere else. And you get it, and you're like, oh, this is not at all what I wanted. And you don't want to have that, like, customer disappointment.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Oh, the other thing about, like, sustainability and manufacturing in general, and without making myself sound like I don't know what I'm doing, I went into the Among Us license being like, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that. But things change so much when you're talking about a global license or a global IP and not having an American perspective. And what I mean by that is, great, I want it on this material. I want cotton poly blends. I want the softest t-shirts alive because that's what you want. Great, you just made a $35 t-shirt. And if you're selling those items at Walmart, what about low-income kids? This is a free-to-play game. What about low-income kids who are playing this during a pandemic with their friends and they want to buy something for Among Us? And you've just given them a $35 shirt that they're going to grow out of in 6 months.
It's almost like we're talking about accessibility from like a consumer standpoint, to where making, merchandising that's for everybody. I think I've talked about this before because this is actually a complaint I have with Destiny, is that I think that they have some really cool stuff that is relatively inexpensive, but for the most part, the things that I really do want almost always are, I don't want to say prohibitively expensive, because I guarantee I know why they're expensive, because a lot of them are custom made, they're embroidered, this, that, or the other. But like, it seems really tough, because how do you need to make something unique, interesting, and affordable, for like different levels of like investment, from like monetary investment to time investment. Like that's got to be absurdly complicated to like try to break down. And it sucks because I'm sure that there's never a perfect answer. There's always going to be, unfortunately, probably someone who's going to be left out in the cold.
Yep. And I would say that I'm very glad that a lot of our partners understand that, and our licensees understand that. And we've been very lucky to be able to, without being like, rah, capitalism, we've been very lucky to be able to create items at different price points, because that was such a huge part of the conversation is like, yes, would I prefer to only make boutique items? 1000%. I don't like making lower tier stuff. I don't. You don't get to be as creative. You have paint limitations, you have color limitations. It's a different kind of problem solving, but it's not as fun as making, if you have the choice between
you have more constraints that are attached to you to make you, you can't be as creative as you desire.
Yep. But the trade-off is I get to see little kids running around wearing that Among Us stuff, and I get to talk to my friend who does low-income teaching, because I went to school to be a teacher, not to be a merchandiser. Who all of her kids are talking about Among Us, and their parents who can't afford things generally can go to the store and get them a little $3 thing. And that little $3 thing they're so stoked about.
I think you're also, because you're dealing with we're kind of like hyper focusing, not in a bad way, but about Among Us. Like it is a global phenomenon of a game that is accessible to everybody because it is free. Yep. It is fun. It is enjoyable. Do you have friends? Do you not have friends? Like it is a game that anyone can play, any age group, on any device with whoever they want, like anywhere. Like that's nothing else is like that. Like really, like you can maybe make an argument for Fortnite, but Fortnite there's a few more steps, that you need to do to have a quote unquote good Fortnite experience. Well, Among Us, not really. So because of that, you're kind of at this weird intersectionality of like merchandising of we need to make sure that someone like me, who's let's say a content creator, like I want to have a cool thing where I'm like, oh, maybe like I'm an Among Us content creator, maybe. Guys, look at my really cool like Among Us outfit that like I got custom made that's like super expensive versus like, yeah, like maybe the 8-year-old who is in a low income house who's like, man, me and my friends love Among Us, but I can't have anything cool, It's got to be really tough. Like intersectionality in general is just like a really tough situation to be in because it's same thing there. You don't want to accidentally leave somebody out. Yeah. And it's really hard to, Yep. Not that isn't like, which by the way is not an excuse to not do it because I know that's like the easiest thing is that like, oh, it's hard, so don't do it. No, do it because it's hard, because it's worthwhile. Like the intended results of having like, even just like monetarily, like, yeah, maybe it doesn't have like the highest margins, but you're still making something and earning an income and paying workers and getting someone a product they want. Like there is more. I guess I will ask you this question. Based on this conversation, I think I know the answer, but like, is there more to merchandising than just like the bottom line?
It depends on what company you're talking to. For me, yes.
Interesting.
The joke is that I am bad at capitalism because the way that I have tried to structure my business is that we don't, starting wage is $20 an hour. I don't fuck with anything under $20 an hour. Doesn't matter what kind of work you're doing.
Sure.
Every employee gets 100% healthcare benefits paid for. That's dental, that's vision, that's any kind of health insurance. They, what unlimited time off has a cost, unlimited sick days has a cost. And so I've already forgotten the question that we were talking about, but like speaking about, costs of things, if you see a cheap product, there's a reason that it's cheap. And it means that somebody somewhere in that process was taken advantage of, full stop. Sure. There's no other way to have a cheap product. If you are paying a living wage, your product is not going to be cheap. That being said, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, it kind of reminds me of like, there's always that graph where it's like,
fast, cheap, and easy, or whatever.
Exactly. I was like, it's either quick, inexpensive, or good. Like pick two. Yeah. Like you don't get to have all three.
Yep. And you can in some cases, but it's tricky. And part of that is just accepting that, like, again, don't bring the American perspective into everything, right? Mm-hmm. So like, just because this is the brand of shirt that I only want to work on and have my stuff on doesn't mean that that's available in a different country.
So this is like a smaller version of that, but like, so I have ran unsuccessfully and crashed into the ground my own merch store, but part of the process for that was like, I know folks who watch me historically are not obscenely wealthy. Like I know that because I can see my stats, my metrics. I know where you're from. Like I know everything about you, person listening, everything. But like I have a pretty good idea, of what my audience, like what the demographic actually is over time. So it would make me a ginormous asshole if I was like, this is exactly what I want, but like I don't think about what their price points are. I would argue personally that like the idea that like the bottom line is the most important thing, yes and no, because there's also value in like there's a lot of like unstatistical value around like brand loyalty. Around even like word of mouth conversations around, maybe by me selling a shirt for $5 less, I sell maybe 2,000 more shirts, and all of a sudden I have made more money despite like it being a little more costly for me to make prospectively. So I think that at least for me, it's like it's a really tough place to be, trying to always This reminds me of the conversation I had with Cameron. It's not fun to be in charge of, like, people's happiness. In the sense that, like, I'm going to make someone sad.
Yeah.
And you have to figure out what is the least amount of damage I potentially can do with this decision. And that sucks. It sucks when you're dealing with lots of people because you can't make everyone happy. And me, I'm a people pleaser.
Same.
I hate it. I don't want to be, but I am. I admit that about myself. So it's like, it's really tough trying to figure out all these things for that. I can't even imagine, like, doing that as, like, a career. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's, I mean, in the bottom line, you know, there are products that we don't make profit on. There's just straight up products that I lose money making. But I did it because I'm helping out a friend. I indie game dev wanted to do this thing. Nobody else would take the project. No one would return their calls, but I knew I could do it, and I could do it on my weekends.
Yeah.
And yeah, I fully believe that, like, bottom line doesn't matter as long as your people are taken care of, and there's value there. The money isn't the only value that products can bring.
That's a great way of putting it, I think, because, like, you are, even if you are, let's say, making net zero as, like, a business, you're still employing, you know, between 7 to maybe 9 people, all their benefits, stuff like that. So you're contributing in your own way, even if, like, you are at a net zero for a situation. So we have 10 minutes left. It has been.
Oh gosh.
I know. It happened last week too, where I'm like, like, I want to. Goodness. Okay. So chat, I'm gonna try to get. You didn't ask a lot of questions, but if you have more, you're welcome to ask them. But this is a question from Alec. What was your first mass-produced item for a video game company?
I saw that, and I've been trying to think this entire time, but I don't remember what I didn't realize today was Thursday. I don't remember. There's the head empty, no thoughts. I would say that the first, like.
What do you first remember? Like, maybe it's not the first thing you ever made, but, like, what's the most recent thing you remember?
I mean, I think probably in terms of, like, timeline stuff, I think that the Stanley Parable, if anybody ever played that game.
Yeah.
We did Stanley Parable merchandise, and when I had first started, that was one of the first things that I worked on with. I am blanking on his name right now, but we worked with him on, like, posters and other stuff. So that was mass produced to a lesser extent. The first, like, big boy, absolutely bonkers, insane stuff that I worked on was Five Nights at Freddy's. So I had been watching Markiplier play, and I had just started at a previous company. I was like, hey, Five Nights at Freddy's looks like it's really big. Like, it looks like, or it's going to be really big. And so I reached out to Scott, and I was like, hey, Scott, I don't know, I work in licensing. You know, I've been here for, like, a month. Do you want to do merch? And I knew nothing about merch at that point. And so we signed what is called an exclusive license agreement, which is why there was no Five Nights at Freddy's merch outside of ours for that first year, because I legally prohibited anybody else from making it. And now there's a company named Stryker Media Entertainment in charge of it, and they sub-license it out to a bunch of different folks. So they're an agent now, as opposed to a licensee, which is what we were. But yeah, so Five Nights at Freddy's is probably the first time that I dipped my toes into the wide world of how the hell do I get plush around the world.
Yeah, I got you. It's like, because you've mentioned plush so much. Is that like a majority of what you make is, like, plush products?
No, but it's the thing that it's black t-shirts and plush. That's the thing that people ask for the most. Plush also, I would say, in 70% of the time, they also have the best margins. Apparel has the crappiest margins.
Interesting.
But
I never knew that.
Yeah, it sucks. But plush, you know, generally speaking, without being like, here's how everything works. I mean, like, realistically speaking, a plush manufacturing cost, we're not talking about landed, we're not talking about designer fees, we're not talking about shipping. You're looking at $3 to $5, probably. Sometimes it goes higher if it's a simple one. You know, realistically speaking, if it's a simple one. And then, you know, $450 for fulfillment. So my fulfillment center charges $450 for each item sold. And the margins on it are just really nice. The trade-off is that they take up a shit ton of room.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't really see any other questions. I guess because, like, this is at least for me, like, a pretty nebulous topic. So it's like, I don't even know where to start with, like, a lot of the questions I'm going to ask. Oh, I do have one thing I want to ask you. So my friend bought me, so I'm a big fan of Hololive, which is a VTuber organization. Apparently my friend bought me, this. I want to know your opinion on this. How do you feel about this?
Wait. Hang on. Ah! Give me 1 sec.
I just want to know how you feel about this. Am I about to be one-upped? I feel like I'm about to be one-upped here. Oh, I feel like I'm about to be one-upped here. Oh,
it has seen some better days, but
nice.
I too have.
It was that, or I was curious. I've seen the one with Garrus Vakarian. Seen that one. He has, for terms, he has a lot of cake. He has a lot of cake going on in that one.
Here's the thing. I am forever salty that BioWare would not let me make Iron Bull booby mouse pad. It was such like.
Oh man.
His ample bosom, please. But yeah, so I think they're the funniest things ever.
I was streaming when he gave this to me as a present, and I just started laughing. I was losing my mind. I almost cried. I was like, I cannot believe you bought me this, because I would never buy this for myself.
That's the same.
In a million years.
My friend got this for me for Christmas and was like, don't open this around people. And I was like, ooh,
boy.
That's not a good opening.
Yeah, right. Like that's like, oh man. Okay.
Yep.
Well, as we're wrapping up, we got about 5 minutes left. I meant to ask you this beforehand, but do you have a favorite charity organization that you want to plug or that you like?
Yes, but can I get it to you after? Because there's a anything that's focused around Girls Who Code. I don't know if they're a charity.
Sure.
But anything like that. There's also there's a couple different manufacturing facilities. There's one that I'm thinking of specifically, and I cannot remember the name of that. Basically, they work to help women who have immigrated to the United States, especially survivors of domestic violence. They basically train them on how to sew and do all sorts of really cool stuff and get them jobs and security effectively. So there's all sorts of things. I'm also just, again, I have no memory. Head empty, no thoughts. But yes, I will give you a charity after this.
Awesome.
I watched your last one. I should have. Fuck.
No, that's okay. No, I should have asked you. It's just one of those things to where it's just been a very busy week, and it just slipped my mind until right about now. For those who don't know, part of being on the show, if you are a guest, is I will give $250 to the charity of your choice. I obviously can't pay you for your expertise for what you're actually worth because I'm just one man. I am not Jeff Bezos. I just work for him. So not yet. So one last question for you. What is the weirdest thing that's not NDA related that you have ever made?
Can I?
You can change the goalpost if you want.
Can I get somewhat not safe for work?
Yes.
I guess
that's
the
fine.
question.
Yes, absolutely.
Not what I
once
made.
again, we're all adults here. It's okay.
The funniest thing that happens in manufacturing is that once you make a product, you have no control what happens to it after the fact.
Oh,
Yep.
Continue. Please continue.
There was a mod community. There's two different examples I'm thinking of. There was a mod community that focused solely and specifically on taking the Five Nights at Freddy's plush that we made and making them accessible, shall we say. There is also, and then we had people contacting us hey, can we become an official licensee? And I was like, no. No, the Scott Cawthon, the heavily Christian man, is not going to let you make those plush accessible.
That is the nicest way I've ever heard that topic ever mentioned is the...
The other is that we had a significant number of people who reached out to me, specifically for Among Us, in the Daddy Dom Little Girl community, who wanted to make Among Us pacifiers and other diapers and paraphernalia.
Baby-related products.
But the thing is I had to say no to all of them. Because that gets into some weird territory, and there's just it's still a kid's game, and there is some sort of consideration that we have to have for it. But
Absolutely.
B, most of the kink play items that are created would not pass an ASTM or CPSAA certification because they're gluing certain things onto it, and they're still using part of the problem with plush and stuff is that even if it's not meant for children, it doesn't matter. You still have to be child safe, because if a child sees it and associates it
absolutely.
with thing, it's a kid's product,
Well,
even
yeah.
if it never interacts with the
I mean,
kid.
it's why when I open my PS5, if something's like in a bag, it still says like keep away from children, right?
Yes.
Like just because something is intended for adults doesn't mean that you have to like think that never in a million years is a child ever gonna have that. Literally, pills like are the best example, right? Like there's child-safe pill bottles. It's every pill bottle now, just because like that way you don't have like a baby who just wanders around is like, oh, I'm gonna have so much ibuprofen, I'm gonna see God, but like they will. We don't want that though. Yeah, that's got to be such a. I didn't even think about like trying. I don't have time for this. Rapid fire question: is there like different things you have to consider and regulate for child products versus like normal average adult products?
Yes.
Okay.
There's flammability, there's lead testing, there's Proposition 8. So like there's certain things that phosphorylate, or I don't know. It's a bunch of bad things and things that you can't have in certain states. Quebec up in Canada requires that. We just found this out from a thing that we're doing. Like Quebec requires you to have a manufacturer listed with them, with the state of Quebec, and their shit's not in English. So like if you don't speak French,
it's in French, yeah.
Yeah, they don't care. So every place has different rules and regulations, and sometimes you have a country that's just like, oh, whatever. Like, is there lead? Don't put it in your mouth, idiot. Like, it just depends. Yeah.
I got you.
Prop 65 in California. Yes, thank you, Cowboy Alec.
Awesome. Okay, well, so we are at the end of our time here today. So I have been Teawrex. You can find me here always, twitch.tv/Teawrex, maybe other places eventually. And then this is my friend Rowan. Do you want to plug anything else? Your Twitter, your anything else?
Yeah, I warning that my Twitter is only somewhat for work. It's also a lot of like talking about Destiny or whatever thing I am hyper obsessed with. So my Twitter is just at Rowden. I don't really use Instagram. My company is Dual Wield Studio, so you can find me there. The company name on Twitter is also Dual Wield Studio. Yeah, I basically just exist on Twitter. For better or for worse. Usually for worse. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
one social media is enough for me.
Yeah, 1000%. But like if you're an indie streamer, if you want to know how to make a Christmas present for your mom, if you're an independent artist, I literally love talking about this stuff. And like I do a significant amount of like I don't charge for it for a lot of things. Like if you just have a question about something, my I should say, I don't know if my DMs are actually open. Generally speaking, my DMs are open, and I'm more than happy to answer questions about I just want to know how this thing's made. Can you explain that? I think we met because I explained how the Destiny toaster was made.
That sounds right.
Yeah. So I love talking about merch. Never shut up about it.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you for listening. If you are here on Twitch right now, thank you for watching. Thank you for chatting. If you're listening elsewhere, thank you as well. We will see you next week, where we'll be talking with Joe Blackburn, the director of Destiny 2, about what it means to be a director in the game industry, because I have no earthly idea what goes into that. I'm sure it'll be a good time. Thank you for watching, everybody. Have a good rest of your Thursday night, or whatever time it is for you. Thank you very much. Yes. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I will now be running our 3 minutes of ads here at the end, as per our contractual obligation chat. You're welcome to stick around for those if you want, but thank you for watching.